What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of National Pastime. John and Toaster here. And in today's episode, we are talking about Tom Brady's MCL and his continually growing legacy. He's insane. We talk about Jimmie Ward sparking a little bit of a interdivisional battle between the Rams and the 49ers before the season even starts. And talking trash about Matthew Stafford. So we'll get into his quote there. The Cowboys officially are starting training camp this week. So football really is back, which we're fucking stoked about. We will touch on the vaccination rates of teams and whether or not we think that teams are going to hit the threshold that is necessary to really make things easy for everybody there. And we will dive into who truly is America's team. Let's go.
Let's fucking go.
Okay, so Tom Brady's legacy just apparently continues to grow and grow and grow. He played the entire season on a torn MCL that I guess he suffered his last season in New England. And he was never once on the injury report, which raises some eyebrows. But I mean, Tom Brady's, this is just ridiculous. Like every year there's something new. It's like, I don't know. You can't even, there's no superlative that really grasps how ridiculous he is, right?
No, there's not. I mean, this is a shot to the TB12 method because obviously he is showing his age a little bit if he's still getting injured, because that's their whole shtick is that you prevent injury, flexion, just mind over matter. But the biggest thing to me on this story is the impact on betting, and this league is putting out injury reports for the sanctity of that aspect of the game. And the fact that he was able to go an entire season without even being listed on the injury report is shocking and will need to change now that gambling is being legalized across the board. I mean, we already talked about in our Sky Judge conversations that the league's going to have to answer to somebody if games are now being essentially questioned the integrity of, if a bad call here or there. And I mean, the only saving grace for Tom Brady here is that they won, right? This is a Pete Rose example, right? So he bet on the game, but yeah, he was winning. He had the most hits. Why do you care if he was betting on the game? Because obviously he wasn't betting to lose the game, right? And so Tom Brady, the only thing that holds him up, I mean, can you imagine what would have happened if they weren't in playoff contention? This would have come out way earlier, right?
For sure. And I think in addition to that, it's just the general effect that it has on the gambling market, and nobody thinks Tom Brady was out here throwing games, right? That's just not who he is. Like, I don't think anybody's questioning that, but it's like
he might have given a couple for Breeze's legacy. I don't know. You don't know. When it started mattering, then he took it to Breeze. But here, take a couple of regular season games. You're probably going to get hurt. Okay, you had 13 broken ribs. It happens, bro. Take a W, eat a W, and I'll take care of it in the postseason.
Yeah, but like if he was listed on the injury report every week with an MCL injury, I'm curious how that would have affected overall where the public money went. Again, it didn't change the outcome, but it is very interesting to think about. You're right.
Well, but this sport it's a contact sport, and you think about injuries like this in hockey, they only have to report lower body injury, upper body injury, right? Illness.
It's so stupid.
But at the same time, it lets them know that it's impacted, but it doesn't give a competitive advantage to the other team to know that, hey, his MCL is completely torn. Not that you can go low anymore, but throwing him around a little bit extra is not going to be something that he's going to enjoy at this point in time versus a Tom Brady that's perfectly healthy and you're worried about getting a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty or something like that, right?
Yeah, for sure. I do want to say too, like, not discrediting the injury by any means. I mean, you're talking about a ligament tear in your knee. It's significant, but as somebody that's torn both my ACLs, and at one point had a clean tear, at another point had a partial tear. The clean tears are extremely more manageable,
Yeah.
especially from a pain standpoint. And it, I was able to walk off, right? Not comfortably necessarily when it happened, but I was able to walk off, and it was like in my head, I'm like, oh, I must be fine, right? It's like, nope, saw the doctor. There's nothing there, man. And I don't know, like structurally, how the MCL plays into throwing a football necessarily. We know Tom's not a scrambler. We know Tom's smart. He's going to get the ball out. He's going to not going to put himself in harm's way. So I I don't know. I'm a little skeptical as to like how much this injury actually mattered for him to
Yeah,
some degree.
the MCL definitely would have been one of the most manageable ligament tears for him, just because of his lack of movement in the pocket and explosive stuff. Obviously, your lateral movement will be limited with your MCL, but he's not cutting left and cutting right and trying to get past somebody. He's usually cutting left and then going down and trying to fight another day.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, I don't know, maybe I'm just like talking on my ass here, but he seems like a very like rotational thrower, like with his upper body in a way. Like he's not necessarily driving through with his hips as much or like torquing on his post leg as much as some guys do to generate power. And I don't know, maybe his style just in general has saved him here. But
But I think his style might have changed out of that as well, because he gets knocked for his quote unquote arm strength. And then you can go back and watch him in the 2011 Super Bowl, and he's freaking throwing balls 72 yards in the air as well. So he's got the power. I think that he's the type that is cerebral enough to change his game to suit what his limitations are. And quite frankly, the league should watch out next year if he's going to be not necessarily more mobile, but more intact. And then they still get their starting 22 back. Plus, I'm excited to watch Gio Bernard out of this backfield, because James White had 14 receptions in the Super Bowl, and that's exactly the shoes that they were missing last year. So league should be on notice for sure.
Yeah, they look scary. And you know what's funny is I don't think until the tail end of the regular season last year was ever thinking about them as the favorites per se. I don't know why that was. And maybe it was my own bias because, they lost to the Bears earlier in the year, but I just felt like, okay, Tampa's good, right? And then you get to the end of the year and you're like, holy shit. Like I was just looking at his numbers here. So last year he threw for over 4,600 yards and 40 touchdowns, which is his second highest total he's ever thrown in a season.
Outside the 2007 year with Randy Moss. Yeah.
But also just quick aside on that season, that year he led the league in completion percentage, yards, touchdowns. His touchdown percentage was almost 9%. Like almost 9% of his throws were a touchdown that year. Is ridiculous. His yards per attempt were 8.3, and it's like you just continue to look through all of his other seasons. The one that kind of blows my mind, maybe even more so than that, was in 2011. He threw for over 5,200 yards and 39 touchdowns, was not the league leader in either of those categories. His 8.6 yards per attempt were his highest of any season of his career, including that bananas 2007 season. And he didn't lead the league in passing or in that particular statistic that year either.
And he didn't win a Super Bowl either of those years either. Those were the 2 years that Olivia Manning took him down with her offspring. So I think that's partially what the learning lesson was last year, though, is that doesn't need to be about Brady. It's ultimately not about Brady. And I wish there were more superstars that took that page out of their book, Devin Booker, and just, put the team in the position they needed to be to win. And again, I'm excited to see what they're able to do next year, because I think it's going to be not betting on anything, not guaranteeing anything, but I think it'll be a special season to watch.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. It wasn't about Tom. And he still completed 65% of his passes for 4,600 yards and 40 touchdowns without an MCL.
And
So
without a preseason, and there's two things that you can look at when you're talking about a quarterback and wide receivers relationship. And typically Tom Brady's been on the side of knowing exactly where his receiver is going to be, hitting that spot, trusting the receiver. It's part of the reason, N'Keal Harry probably wasn't his favorite target. But then you also have the freak of nature, like the Randy Moss, right? And he had fun with Randy Moss. Evans is on a similar, not trajectory as that, but he's a freak himself. And so once you start combining knowing where his freak's going to be and being able to hit him in stride, I think this offseason is going to be fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. So is Tampa your favorite for going into the season?
I think they have to be, just because they returned 22 starters and that defense was absolutely locked down. Granted, the Super Bowl, the Chiefs didn't have their full offensive line, but in typical Brady style too, they weren't blowing people out. They don't typically blow people out. They do just enough to manage the game. I mean, they were one possession away from losing to the Packers the week before or 2 weeks before. So I would consider them the favorite, but I'm not expecting a 2007 just record shattering performance out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, they don't need it, right, in order to be successful. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is maybe to no one's surprise, a pro Tom Brady podcast. He is fucking awesome. And if you love quarterback play, you can't really hate on the guy, I don't think, at this point. So
it's a pro quarterback podcast.
Yes.
And he happens to be definitely the greatest one that's out there right now. And arguably the greatest of all time, as long as he has enough fingers to keep his rings on.
Yeah. Well, if he plays a couple more seasons at this high a level, we're getting into some crazy territory with him, like maybe pushing Bill Russell. You know what I mean? Like, to think about that as well.
Yeah.
But,
well, not to get political about it either, but Tom Brady was the last quarterback to visit the White House too. So he's going back to back. He'll be there again on Tuesday. So as much as there was a decline or a gap in there, Tom Brady back to back White House appearances. Put some asterisks on a couple of those years.
Yeah, the legend grows. The legend grows. I don't know if I would call the guy that's at the center of this next topic the anti-Tom Brady, but if Tom Brady's the greatest winner, Matt Stafford, unfortunately, is known as one of the biggest losers, despite his incredible stats. But Jimmie Ward, the safety for the 49ers, apparently is getting a little fed up with the Stafford hype right now, which I will admit is like, I'm starting to get fed up with it too. Like, it's peaking, and we really need to get football back because this is just ridiculous. But Jimmie Ward basically comes out and says that Stafford's the same QB who was in Detroit that didn't make the playoffs. He had 3 playoff appearances in his career. 0 playoff wins despite his incredible numbers. So I'm kind of with Jimmie Ward on this to some degree. How like this is kind of a spicy one for me, I think. I don't know. What do you think overall?
He goes on to say that he believes he's a top 10 quarterback, maybe even top 5. So he knows that he's one of the greatest quarterbacks, and he's been surrounded by a team that hasn't been able to put together victories, be that from a personnel standpoint or a coaching standpoint. And what this brings me back to is the hype around Dak Prescott. Everybody was on his dick last season for the stats. He was on pace for 6,000 yards before he got injured. He had won 1 game. He lost 5. He was 1-5. He beat the Atlanta Falcons on an onside kick that was absolutely ridiculous. He would have been 0-6. I don't know the exact stats, but I believe he only has 1 win in a game that's one possession or less. So he's
like in his career. That's a nice little stat. We should
so you take somebody that was on a rookie contract and now you're paying them $40 million, and they've proven that they can't win close games.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know you will take any opportunity to pivot to hating on Dak, and we can we can get to that, I think, in the next topic here. But staying on task. Um, I, I mean, we understand, like, I think both of us understand what Jimmie Ward is like getting at here. But I also think, and I'd like to get your take on this as well. But I also think just Stafford is going to be really good this year in that offense. And maybe it is the hype is getting a little overblown, but he's going to put up some freaking numbers in that offense.
Of
And
course he is.
yeah. So I mean, regardless of what the situation was in Detroit, I do think he at times, uh, he didn't do enough, right? He didn't do enough to elevate the team beyond what it was, which is what you expect great quarterbacks to do. But he is no scrub by any means. And even though there's maybe a little too much hype right now, I think there's reason, if you're a Rams fan, to be really excited about what's going to happen. Maybe Jimmie Ward's just a little butthurt about the spotlight isn't as much on them as he thinks it should be. But yeah, I love this off-season spiciness.
No,
Uh,
absolutely. And I think to me, the reason that he's speaking out is because there is a fear there. I think that those are clearly the two top contenders for the NFC West. And I'm not sure that they're going to be able to stop that offense if they actually found something in Cam Akers. Obviously, Stafford got a big boost in his receiving core. Granted, Kenny Galladay was good when healthy, but now he's got Robert Woods to throw to, and Cooper Kupp, and Sean. The biggest factor there is Sean McVay, right?
yeah,
And
totally.
now he's in an offensive system that's going to be geared around scoring points.
Yep. It's going to be fun to watch for sure. I would love to hear Stafford with a little clap back, but I don't think he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that would do that necessarily.
Well, they already clapped back their clap back on Jared Goff when Sean McVay threw him under the bus about finally being excited about the season. So
Yeah.
I don't expect any more back and forth on this. This is typical cornerback talk. They like a lot of posturing, and then that's when you see the numbers on the back of their jersey chasing down some dude that's on a 70-yard reception, right? So I think that's what we might end up seeing from Jimmie Ward right here. But it's fun to talk.
Yeah, and if nothing else, it spices up the two times that they're going to play each other this year, right? And you mentioned them as arguably the two favorites. Obviously, the Seahawks are in that conversation as well, but I think I'm all for anything that's going to crank up those matchups because those are going to be must-watch games, 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and again, he admitted that he's a top 5 quarterback, so it's going to be exciting. It's not. He wasn't holding his team back, and if he can stay healthy, which he's done he's played in a lot of games. He's been dinged up quite a bit, but it's kind of like a Ben Roethlisberger syndrome where you're hurt but you're still playing. And he's been putting up stats for 10 years now, and he's been putting up better stats than Goff was in a much lesser system. So I would put him at one of the top MVP race candidates, quite frankly.
For sure. There's definitely something that's missing there with him though, right? I mean, there's a reason that he wasn't able to elevate Detroit. And I know that they were really bad a lot of years, but he also for a good chunk of that time had the premier wide receiver in football. And it, those top guys do find a way to make chicken salad out of chicken shit and at least put together a competitive team. I mean, some of these Detroit teams for him were they were atrocious. They were atrocious. And he had that 11-5 year in 2014, and he had 2 9-7 seasons. Well, I guess he had 10-6 in 2011 as well. But it's like it's just I don't know, the model of mediocrity in a way, despite the numbers he put up. So there is something there. I just, it's an intangible thing, right? You can't put your finger on it maybe, but
But this is the ultimate team sport in that it's going to take 11 guys on offense and 11 guys on defense to make it successful. And Raiders are probably going to find out that someone running for their lives is not a good way to build a successful team. I mean, looking at his sacks, he's been upwards of 40 for 1, 2, 3, 4 of the last 6 seasons. Like he's been in trouble, right? And I think that has a lot to do with the ultimate wins and losses, because negative plays far outweigh positive plays in this, short of a touchdown, right? But
Yeah.
a sack on first down puts you behind the chains and you're clawing your way back from that standpoint. And a lot of that goes down to coaching and personnel for me.
Yeah, but we also know now that sacks are mostly a quarterback stat. Yeah, we saw Patrick Mahomes run for his life in the Super Bowl, but over the course of 16 games, like, you're going to understand what your personnel is, and you're going to get the ball out quicker if you need to. And guys that take sacks, like a Russell Wilson or whatever, it's mostly on them. So I do think, like, you're giving him a little bit of a pass there, maybe, when I don't think the sacks total should be what we're pointing out. But he has led the league in fourth quarter comebacks twice, including 2016. They won 9 games. They had 8 fourth quarter comebacks, and he had 8 game winning drives. Like, that's pretty wild, actually. I didn't know that before.
Yeah, no, I think he's going to have some fun in in Los Angeles. And I think the league's going to have fun watching him play.
All right, I agree. All right, so you touched on Dak, so I'm going to give you an opportunity here to maybe continue that. But the Cowboys start training camp this Wednesday, so yay for football. But you also have a bit of a conspiracy theory here as to the league protecting their crown jewel, the Dallas Cowboys. You want to get into that?
Dak Prescott's coming off of what was considered a record-breaking year without actually having to play 16 games. And now he gets 1 extra week of preseason to hone his skills, get back in the swing of things. Putting him in the Hall of Fame game means nothing from the league. That's not a huge revenue driver, not a big game as far as you're drawing in new people, because typically your stars aren't even playing in it.
Yeah.
But what happens is now the Cowboys get an extra week of practice over what they would have before going up against the Bucks they're not. Are they playing the Bucks week 1? Yeah, they are, right? So they get an extra week of practice going up against the defending Super Bowl champions. Let's not put this into just they get absolutely slaughtered land, because they also have a young defense that they're trying to build up right now. They may have as many of 3 of their draft picks starting on the defensive side of the ball, and now they get extra reps.
Yeah, in a year where everyone is losing a preseason game, right? Yeah. Like, yeah, they get an extra one, which is definitely clutch. God, that Cowboy privilege, man, it just never stops, does it?
Well, and they didn't add an extra episode of Hard Knocks out of it. That's the worst part about all of this, is Hard Knocks should start a week earlier, because the Cowboys are starting a week earlier.
Is that part of, like, the agreement that teams make?
As to when they start shooting, as to when they start airing? I would assume it's probably on the HBO side of things from a scheduling standpoint, that they've got it regimented as to when it'll air, and it doesn't matter when the NFL starts. They've got those 5 time slots booked out.
Yeah. So I also think it's worth mentioning for people that don't know, but the Hall of Fame game is the first preseason game of the year every year. It's played in Canton, Ohio. It, I think, follows the Hall of Fame ceremony, or is it before? Actually, I'm not entirely sure.
I think it follows.
Yeah, so we'll get our new Pro Football Hall of Fame inductees, and then you get your first preseason game, and the teams that play in it's always an extra preseason game for them, which is why Toaster's saying here that you don't, your stars generally aren't going to play, because they're not going to risk injury in a meaningless extra preseason game. But like you said, now Cowboys might want to get looks at some of their young players. Maybe if they want to get Dak a couple reps at game speed, just even one drive or something, right? To like get him back into the swing of things. Like you've got an advantage there. But bottom line to me, the Hall of Fame game just means football's back. So
Football's back.
yeah.
I mean, and if you want to extend the conspiracy theory to the Steelers too, I'm down with that, because obviously they had a pretty large demise at the end of the year and could probably take a little bit of extra practice to figure out what their plan is, especially if Roethlisberger may not be in the long-term plans at this point. They've got Dwayne Haskins just right behind him, as well as Mason Rudolph as their long-term quarterback. So looking forward to seeing both of them play.
God, what a quarterback room they have. I actually hadn't thought about the fact that Haskins was there, and you pair him with Mason Rudolph, and then we all know Big Ben. That's wild. I can't believe they haven't done more to address that position, honestly, given what Ben's been through the last few years. Like, what round did they draft Rudolph in? Do you remember?
I believe he was a 4th rounder.
Yeah, I guess that's like, it's not a big investment, but it's still, they should have been making more moves, I think. But yeah.
Well, it wasn't a big investment, but it was the 3rd round. Apologies. But they probably saw the time that they needed to move on from him. They've gotten to see him in quite a few game situations, and there's not anything that I saw that says he's your long-term answer at that position.
No, definitely not. And he, if he has to face Myles Garrett twice a year, he might die at some point, given their history. So yeah, I agree. Like Dwayne Haskins isn't going to be the fix, I don't believe, here. And yeah, they should have been doing a little bit more to prep. Anyway, sorry, digress. But yeah, 2 of the premier franchises in league history just getting that little boost from the league, right? I'm with you.
The Steelers were actually supposed to have the moniker of America's team, and they declined it. So Dallas was actually the 2nd choice for America's team. Just a little fun history. Yeah, look it up.
You're making that shit up, aren't you?
No, I'd never made anything up before, but no, that one's actually true.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, fun fact for everybody in this episode. There you go. All right. Last thing I want to get us out of here on, Toaster, is the vaccination rates for teams. I think this is going to be something that's really interesting that we'll be looking at really throughout the year. I know we've talked previously about how there's different rules for vaccinated players and coaches, and it really benefits you to get vaccinated. It makes your life a lot easier, or the players' lives a lot easier.
It's almost impossible as a coach, but as a player, it does make your life a lot easier. Yeah. And almost all tier 1, tier 2 coaches are vaccinated because of the fact that they basically can't do their job without being vaccinated.
Yeah. But the league overall is at 73%, I think was the latest number. But there's 2 teams that are collectively under 50%, which seems like a very bad idea. Especially as we're now days away from the start of camps. So I don't know how the league's going to handle that stuff. But apparently the NFL and the Players Association are talking about possibly IDing players during games and practices that aren't vaccinated. That seems like it's not going to go over well, right?
Yeah, the last time that people were getting tagged with monikers to be able to identify them easier, it did not go well. I mean, this is the basis of HIPAA, is that your medical records are not public. It's a little bit of a weird area in places like the NFL, where injuries and such do need to be disseminated ultimately for the betting standpoint that we talked about previously. But I can't imagine the NFLPA agreeing to being able to say, hey, this guy are not vaccinated. You're going to have to read between the lines and say, hey, this guy, and this guy are sitting on 3 benches 15 yards from the field.
Right.
separately, right? And you can put it together, but they can't identify people in the hallways, in the tunnel, in the locker room and say, you're not vaccinated. I don't see any way that they can do this other than pushing the vaccination even more. Again,
Yeah.
it's a risk standpoint, not a political standpoint or a
Totally.
position. It's just we've identified that our situation is less risky if we have people that are vaccinated. Therefore, the business decision is to reduce that risk as far as possible, and that means getting the most people vaccinated as possible.
Yep, for sure. Does the league have a threshold that they're aiming for? Do you know?
I believe it's just that if you're above, it's either 70% or 85%. The team's restrictions are drastically reduced.
Okay.
I want to say it's a 70% threshold, but really what they're saying is once you're getting to that herdish immunity standpoint, then they're going to be, even though you don't have everybody vaccinated, we can treat everybody as potentially vaccinated because the risk of an outbreak or a large population being affected is much lower.
Yeah, that I think Major League Baseball is using 85% as their threshold. I just wasn't sure if the NFL had designated a number yet. Yeah. I mean, if we have two teams that are under 50%, there's no way I would imagine, unless something drastic changes, that they're going to get to that threshold, right?
No, but it is a little peculiar though, because the rosters are 90-man rosters at this point. So ultimately they're going to be cut near in half, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not these percentages go up or down, because it could very well be that a lot of bubble players are vaccinated, trying to do everything that they can to not risk further
Oh,
losing
yeah.
their roster spot, or it's the opposite way, and a bunch of the veterans that are solid in their positions just are choosing to be vaccinated. So that's going to be the biggest that's going to be the biggest variable, is that once what is it, ultimately 30 players get cut, then these numbers are going to change pretty drastically, because we're talking about each person representing essentially a percentage point.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't even think about that, but you're right. I mean, conventional wisdom, I think, would say that the bubble players are probably the people that are eliminating that from the equation.
Right.
So if
I
numbers
mean,
are,
yeah, you saw it with Armstead last year, right? He got COVID twice before the season even started, and that's what allowed James Robinson to even get playing time, because Armstead was going to be the starting running back, and he didn't even get to play last season. And I think he's still having some pretty significant complications from it. And so just think about the difference in history if he doesn't catch COVID, and we don't even know who this dang 7th round James Robinson picked is. Actually, we still may not anymore, because they drafted a 1st round running back. So we're good now.
well,
We don't.
yeah.
We can get him out of the history books.
Yeah, I was going to say, if James Robinson didn't exist, maybe, the Jags would spend a 1st round pick on a running back. And, oh, wait. Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting. Actually, I had forgotten about that, but yeah, I don't know. I want to be optimistic here, but overall, seeing where the numbers are at now, considering that everybody in this country over the age of 12 can go get the vaccine whenever they want, to have the numbers still be this low at this point, I think is a little alarming.
The other thing that might happen, though, is technically it takes 2 weeks to be considered vaccinated per their reporting procedures. And so
Okay.
as people start reporting to training camp and find out the easy route versus the hard route, it's completely possible that people decide at the end of July that they're going to start getting vaccinated and be ready to go fully vaccinated by the end of by the start of the season.
Well, yeah, and you show up to camp, and I'm sure teams have vaccination sites ready to go, and you haven't gone out of your way to get it, but maybe you're like, okay, I'll walk in the middle of the hallway after practice. I'll stop by and I'll get it just for the hell
You
of
want a
it.
COVID swab today or a COVID shot today? We got both.
Yeah. Do you want to keep doing the COVID swab for the next, foreseeable future, or no? Okay. Yeah. All right, everyone. We will get out on that. Although I do want to mention before we go that I want to be the first to congratulate Al Baker. 64-year-old Al Baker is now the single season sack king in NFL history. Just quick dive into this. Sacks weren't an official NFL stat or weren't counted individually until 1982. And but they still counted team sacks. So essentially, some people went back and watched the game film and attributed individual sacks to people going back as far as 1960 and determined that Al Baker in his rookie season in 1978 had 23 sacks, which is half a sack more than Michael Strahan's 22 and a half. So congratulations to Al, our new sack king.
Well, sack king for probably one more year now that they've added a 17th game. So congratulations on your 1978 accomplishment. You get to just ride that high for another, 6 months now?
I don't know, man. Being 64 years old and achieving an NFL record seems pretty impressive to me, honestly.
I'll just be happy if my sack works at that age. Do you want to confirm my accuracy here? The Steelers were given the nickname of America's team prior to the Cowboys, and it was actually the great Art Rooney that dismissed the suggestion and said he didn't want that. So obviously, the Cowboys have relished in that for years, but nice to know that the Steelers moved on from that moniker that was completely arbitrarily ascribed to them and focused on playing football versus the Dallas Cowboys, who have focused on pretty much marketing for the last 30 years.
Well, whether it's getting the Steelers sloppy seconds or not, the Cowboys, I believe, are the most valuable franchise in the league. So I'd say it's worked out for them, for the most part. For Jerry Jones, anyway.
I was going to say it's worked out for Jerry Jones, and I guess it worked out okay for Dak Prescott. Dude got paid, but it'll be
not so much for the fans.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will get out of here then. Thanks for listening, everybody. As always, please subscribe, tell your friends, follow us on Twitter at NPTFball, and we will see you later.
I was looking at Mark Murphy and basically had a line that there's no update on the Rodgers situation, and please limit your questions to financial statements. So my next dickhead question obviously would have been, okay, financially speaking, do you expect to pay Rodgers a salary this year?